We were the perfect couple until I found out her secret. Everyone who knew us thought we were the perfect couple. Terence and Beatrice, the couple everyone admired, the ones who seemed to have it all. We met in college and instantly clicked. She had this charm, this effortless elegance that drew people to her, and I was no exception. I fell for her hard, and from the way she looked at me, I thought she felt the same. For 5 years, we built a life together, moving in, planning our future, sharing dreams. It felt right. More than right, it felt perfect. Our friends, William and Dakota, were always envious of us. They'd say, "You guys make it look so easy," or, "You're the real deal." And for a long time, I thought they were right. I thought we were untouchable, that we had something special. But, like any facade, cracks begin to show if you look closely enough. The first crack appeared subtly. Beatrice had been acting distant for a while, little things that I brushed off at first. She was quieter during dinner, her phone constantly buzzing but never left face up. She'd say it was work, that she had deadlines looming or last-minute meetings. I wanted to believe her, and for a while, I did. But then came the night that changed everything. It was a Friday, and we were supposed to meet William and Dakota for drinks at a new bar in town. Beatrice had been excited about it all week, constantly texting Dakota about what they'd wear and where we'd go after. But on the day of, she suddenly backed out. "I'm swamped with work, Terence. You go without me." "I'll catch up later," she said, flashing me that soft smile that always disarmed me. "Are you sure? You've been looking forward to this." "Yeah, go. Don't worry about me. I'll finish up here and maybe join you guys later." Something felt off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Still, I let it go. I left for the bar, meeting William and Dakota, but throughout the night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I texted Beatrice a couple of times, no response. Maybe she was just caught up in work, but the nagging doubt in the back of my mind kept growing. Halfway through the night, I excused myself and headed home, hoping I was just being paranoid. When I got there, the apartment was dark. I figured Beatrice had gone to bed, tired from her day. But then, I saw it, her laptop, still open on the kitchen counter. Normally, Beatrice was careful about leaving her work stuff lying around. Curious, I walked over and glanced at the screen. Her email was open, and the subject line of the latest message caught my eye. "Last night was perfect. When can I see you again?" My stomach dropped. My heart started racing. I stared at the screen, hoping it was some misunderstanding. Maybe it was a colleague, maybe the message wasn't as suspicious as it seemed. But as I clicked the message, the truth hit me like a punch to the gut. "I can't stop thinking about you, Beatrice. I'll find an excuse to get away again next weekend. Let's make it happen. Terence doesn't need to know." The sender's name was William. I felt like the ground had disappeared beneath me. My best friend, our best friend, and my girlfriend. I scrolled through the emails, each one more damning than the last. They had been sneaking around for months, meeting up whenever they could, lying to both me and Dakota. The affair wasn't just physical, it was emotional, intimate. They shared secrets, inside jokes, and plans for the future, plans that didn't include me. I stood there, staring at the screen, numb to everything around me. The woman I loved, the person I thought I would spend my life with, had been betraying me with the one person I thought I could trust more than anyone. The betrayal was like a knife twisting in my gut. When Beatrice finally came home that night, she looked surprised to see me sitting in the dark, her expression instantly turning to concern. "Terence? What are you doing home so early? You didn't stay out with William and Dakota?" I didn't answer her right away. I just stared at her, trying to reconcile the person standing in front of me with the one who had written those emails. "I came home because I had a feeling," I said slowly, my voice barely holding back the hurt. "And it turns out my gut was right." Beatrice froze, her eyes widening slightly. What are you talking about? I saw your emails, I said, my voice cracking. With William. Her face went pale. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. The silence between us stretched on for what felt like hours before she finally whispered, I didn't mean for this to happen. Those words. That was all she could say. After everything, after months of lying to me, all she could say was that she didn't mean for it to happen. I stood up, pacing the room, trying to make sense of the chaos in my mind. How long? I asked, my voice breaking. How long have you been sneaking around behind my back with him? Beatrice wiped away a tear, her hands shaking. A few months, it just happened. I didn't plan it, Terence. I swear, I never meant to hurt you. But you did. I shouted, unable to control the anger rising inside me. You didn't think for 1 second about what this would do to me? To Dakota? William is supposed to be my best friend, and you've been. She broke down into sobs, covering her face with her hands. I'm so sorry, Terence. I don't know why I did it. I was confused, You weren't confused, I interrupted, my voice trembling with fury. You knew exactly what you were doing. You made a choice, B. You chose him. The weight of her betrayal crushed me. I couldn't look at her without seeing the lies, without imagining them together. The perfect life we had built, the future we had planned, was gone. Everything I thought I knew about her, about us, had been a lie. Beatrice sat there, her body racked with sobs, but I felt no sympathy. I couldn't. My emotions were a storm, anger, hurt, confusion, swirling inside me, and I didn't know how to calm it. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to demand answers, but I already knew the truth. What more could she say that would fix the wreckage of our relationship? She finally spoke, her voice weak and barely audible through her tears. I never meant for it to get this far, Terence. I love you, but I don't know how it happened with William. It was a mistake. I know I've ruined everything, but I swear it didn't mean anything. Didn't mean anything. I repeated bitterly. You've been sneaking around with him for months, B. Don't stand here and tell me it didn't mean anything. She opened her mouth, then closed it, clearly searching for the right words. But what could she say that would change anything? The damage was done. Every late-night meeting, every lie about being busy with work, every email between her and William had torn us apart piece by piece. I couldn't believe she could look me in the eyes and still say she loved me, not after everything she had done. Does Dakota know? I asked, my voice icy. Beatrice shook her head. No. She doesn't know anything. That just made it worse. William hadn't only betrayed me, he was betraying Dakota too. Our group, our close-knit circle, was shattered, and now, 2 lives were about to unravel because of their selfish choices. I couldn't wrap my head around how they had managed to keep this secret for so long, how they could pretend to be friends while stabbing us both in the back. I ran a hand through my hair, trying to steady myself. I don't know if I can ever forgive you for this, Beatrice. Her sobs grew louder, her face crumpling with guilt. Please, Terence. Don't say that. I know I messed up. I know I destroyed everything we had, but I want to fix this. I'll end it with William. I'll do whatever it takes to make things right. I stared at her, feeling a deep sense of loss. This was the woman I had imagined spending my life with, and now, standing in front of me, she felt like a stranger. The betrayal was too much. I didn't know if I had it in me to give her another chance. I don't think there's anything left to fix, I said quietly, my voice void of emotion. You chose him, B. You made your decision, and now you have to live with it. She took a step closer, reaching for me, but I backed away. The thought of her touch made me sick. I couldn't look at her without seeing the lies, the deception, and the countless moments she had spent with William behind my back. "I need to go," I muttered, turning toward the door. "Terence, please," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "Don't walk away. We can fix this. We can get through it. I love you." I paused for a moment, the words hanging in the air between us. She still didn't get it. She couldn't understand that love wasn't enough to erase the betrayal, the lies. Love didn't fix everything, and in this case, it certainly couldn't fix us. Without looking back, I walked out the door, slamming it shut behind me. I couldn't stay in that apartment any longer, it was filled with memories that now felt tainted. The dinners we had shared, the nights we had spent together, it all felt like a lie. I drove aimlessly for hours, the city lights blurring as I tried to clear my head. Everything felt surreal. Beatrice's betrayal wasn't just an affair, it was the destruction of everything I had believed in, everything I had trusted. How could she love me and do something like this? How could William, the friend I had known for years, betray me like that? Eventually, I ended up at Dakota's place. I wasn't sure if it was a good idea to come here, but I couldn't face this alone. Dakota had been my rock for years, and if anyone deserved to know the truth, it was her. She had been with William even longer than I had been with Beatrice, and I knew this would shatter her world just as much as it had shattered mine. When Dakota opened the door, she looked surprised to see me, but her face quickly softened when she saw the look in my eyes. "Terence? What's wrong?" I stepped inside, not knowing where to start. How could I tell her that her husband had been sneaking around with my girlfriend? How could I break her heart the way mine had been broken? "We need to talk," I said, my voice heavy with the weight of what I was about to reveal. She frowned, her concern deepening. "What happened? Is everything okay?" I shook my head, unable to hold back the truth any longer. "It's about William and Beatrice." Her eyes widened, and she took a step back, confusion and fear flickering across her face. "What about them?" I took a deep breath, my chest tightening. "They've been having an affair. I found their emails, Dakota. It's been going on for months." The color drained from her face as the words sank in. "No," she whispered, shaking her head in disbelief. "That can't be true." "I'm sorry," I said, my voice trembling. "I wish it wasn't, but it's true. I saw the emails. They've been lying to both of us." Dakota stood there, her hands trembling as the realization hit her. Tears welled up in her eyes, and I could see the pain written all over her face. She had trusted William, just like I had trusted Beatrice, and now everything she thought she knew was crumbling. "How could they do this to us?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "I don't know," I said quietly. "But they did." We sat down on the couch, both of us lost in our own thoughts, struggling to make sense of the betrayal. The perfect lives we had thought we were living were gone, replaced by heartbreak and anger. The people we loved had destroyed everything, and there was no going back. Dakota sat next to me on the couch, her face pale and stunned. The weight of what I had just told her hung heavy in the air, like a storm cloud waiting to burst. She hadn't spoken since I'd said the words, "They've been having an affair." I could see the same pain in her eyes that I felt in my chest, that crushing sense of betrayal, of the ground beneath you shifting into quicksand. "How could he?" Dakota finally whispered, her voice so soft I barely heard her. Her eyes were brimming with tears, but she was holding them back, fighting for control. "William, he's my husband. We've been together for 8 years. I don't understand." I didn't have an answer. I didn't understand either. How could two people we loved, who we trusted with our lives, do this to us? "They've been lying to us," I said, my voice raw. "All this time. Pretending like everything was normal, like nothing was wrong. I saw their emails, Dakota. It wasn't just a mistake. It wasn't a one-time thing. They've been meeting up for months. Her hand flew to her mouth, her body trembling as she absorbed the reality of what I was saying. "I don't know what to do," she said, her voice cracking. "Everything feels like it's falling apart. I don't even know if I can look at him now." I put my arm around her, pulling her into a hug. Dakota and I had always been close, but this was something different. We were both reeling from the same betrayal, two people whose lives had been shattered by the people we thought we knew best. "I'm so sorry," I whispered. "I didn't want to be the one to tell you, but you had to know." She nodded, her tears finally spilling over as she clung to me. "I'm glad you told me," she said through her sobs. "I couldn't have kept living like everything was normal, like he wasn't." She couldn't finish the sentence, and I didn't expect her to. There was nothing either of us could say to make this better. We were both drowning in the same ocean of pain. A few hours passed before I left Dakota's apartment. She needed time to process everything, and honestly, so did I. But before I went, we agreed on one thing: we couldn't just sit back and let them continue lying to us. We needed answers. We needed to confront them. That night, I drove home, my mind racing with thoughts of how I would confront Beatrice again. I wasn't sure what I was going to say, but I knew I couldn't leave things the way they were. I had walked out earlier, needing space, but now it was time to face the truth head-on. When I got back to the apartment, Beatrice was sitting on the couch, her eyes red and swollen from crying. She looked up at me as I walked in, her expression filled with guilt and desperation. "Terence, please," she began, standing up as if she was about to rush over to me. "I've been thinking about everything. I know I hurt you, but I want to make this right. We can fix this." I held up my hand, stopping her in her tracks. "Don't," I said, my voice flat. "Don't act like we can just fix this with a few apologies. You've been lying to me for months, B. You've been lying to Dakota too." Her face crumpled, and she sank back onto the couch. "I know," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I hate myself for what I've done. But Terence, I still love you. I don't want to lose you." I walked over to the kitchen table and sat down, the weight of the situation pressing down on me like a boulder. "Do you really expect me to believe that? After everything you've done?" She didn't answer right away, just sat there staring at me with those eyes that had once made me feel like the luckiest man in the world. But now, all I could see was the betrayal, the lies, the nights she had spent with William while I was at home thinking everything was fine. "I don't know what I was thinking," she said after a long silence. "I got caught up in something I couldn't control. I never wanted it to go this far." I scoffed, shaking my head. "That's not an excuse, B. You had a choice. You always had a choice, and you chose to keep lying." She stood up and walked over to me, her hands trembling as she reached out to touch me. "Please, Terence. We can get through this. I'll do anything. I'll end things with William. I'll prove to you that I still love you." I pulled away from her, unable to bear the touch of her hands. "End things with William?" I repeated, my voice filled with disbelief. "How do you think Dakota's going to feel about that? Do you even care that you're destroying her life too?" Beatrice's face went pale. "Dakota doesn't know, does she?" I shook my head, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. "She knows now. I told her everything." Beatrice sank back into the couch, her face buried in her hands. "God," she whispered. "I never wanted to hurt her either." I sat there in silence, watching her fall apart, but the sympathy I had once felt for her was gone. She had made her choices, and now she had to live with them. The next day, William and Dakota came over to our apartment. Dakota and I had agreed to confront them together. It was time for them to face the consequences of what they had done. When William walked in, he looked nervous, glancing between me and Dakota as if he already knew what was coming. "We need to talk," I said, my voice cold. William nodded, his face tense. I know, he said quietly. I owe you both an explanation. I didn't want an explanation. I didn't want to hear the details of their betrayal. I just wanted the truth to be laid out in the open so that we could finally move on, however that looked. As William and Beatrice sat down across from Dakota and me, the weight of the moment settled in. We were no longer the perfect couples we had once been. We were four people, broken and betrayed, trying to pick up the pieces of our shattered lives. I don't know if we can ever come back from this, I said finally, breaking the silence. But I need to know the truth. I need to know why. William lowered his head, unable to meet my eyes. It started as a mistake, he said, his voice heavy with regret. I never meant for it to get this far. But Beatrice and we. Spare me the details, I interrupted. I just want to know why you lied to me, William. Why you pretended to be my friend while sneaking around with my girlfriend. He looked up at me then, his eyes filled with guilt. Because I was a coward, he admitted. I didn't want to lose you as a friend, Terrence. I didn't want to lose Dakota. But I made a terrible choice, and now I'm paying the price. The room fell into an uncomfortable silence after William's confession. His words hung in the air, heavy with regret, but they didn't make me feel any better. The damage had already been done, and no amount of apologies or explanations could undo it. I looked over at Dakota, who sat beside me, her face pale, her expression a mix of pain and disbelief. She hadn't said much since William walked in, her eyes distant, as if she couldn't quite process what was happening. Beatrice sat across from me, fidgeting with her hands, unable to meet my gaze. The woman I had loved for years, the woman I thought I knew inside and out, felt like a stranger to me now. Her affair with William had changed everything, and as much as I wanted answers, I wasn't sure they would bring me any closure. Why didn't you just end it? I asked, my voice quieter now, as if I didn't have the strength to yell anymore. If you weren't happy, if you wanted something else, why didn't you just break up with me, Beatrice? You could have spared me all this pain. Her eyes finally lifted to meet mine, glistening with unshed tears. I didn't want to lose you, she whispered, her voice trembling. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Terrence. I didn't want to throw that away. I thought I could. I don't know, fix things. But I was scared of what it would mean if I told you the truth. I shook my head, feeling a mixture of frustration and heartbreak. Fix things. You thought keeping this secret, sneaking around with William, would somehow fix us. I wasn't thinking straight, she said, her voice breaking. I got caught up in something I couldn't control, and by the time I realized how far it had gone, it was too late. I looked over at William, who had been sitting silently, guilt etched across his face. He still hadn't looked at Dakota, and I could see the tension building between them. Dakota had always been the calm, rational one, but I could tell she was holding back a storm of emotions. Finally, she spoke, her voice cold and sharp. You've destroyed everything, William. He flinched at her words, his head hanging low. I know, he muttered. I can't undo what I've done, but I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you. Dakota scoffed, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. You didn't mean to hurt me. How can you even say that? You've been lying to me for months, sleeping with Beatrice behind my back, and you expect me to believe you didn't mean to hurt me? William opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. He had no defense. What could he say? The truth was out, and there was no way to soften the blow. I watched as Dakota's expression hardened. She wasn't crying anymore, her tears had dried up, leaving only anger and betrayal in their place. We're done, she said firmly, her voice resolute. I can't be with someone who betrayed me like this. You made your choice, William, and now you'll have to live with it. William's face crumpled, and I could see the weight of her words hit him like a ton of bricks. Dakota, please, he whispered, his voice desperate. I know I messed up, but don't throw us away. We can get through this. She shook her head, standing up from the couch. No. You threw us away the moment you started sleeping with Beatrice. There's nothing left to save. I looked at Beatrice, who sat quietly, her hands trembling in her lap. Part of me wanted to say the same thing Dakota had said, to tell Beatrice that we were done, that there was no way back from this. But the other part of me, the part that had loved her for so long, wasn't ready to let go. I stood up, feeling the weight of the situation crushed down on me. I don't know what happens next, I said quietly, my eyes fixed on Beatrice. But I know I can't be with someone I don't trust. You've shattered that trust, B. And I don't know if I can ever get it back. Her tears spilled over again, but I couldn't find it in myself to comfort her. Not anymore. She had made her choices, and now we were all paying the price. Dakota walked to the door, her chin held high despite the heartbreak written across her face. I followed her, pausing at the threshold. William and Beatrice sat there in silence, both of them drowning in their guilt and shame. It wasn't enough. Nothing they could say or do would make this right. I'll be back to get my stuff, Dakota said, her voice steady. Don't be here when I do. Without another word, we walked out of the apartment, the door closing softly behind us. The cold evening air hit me like a wake-up call, but I still felt numb. Dakota and I stood in the hallway for a moment, neither of us speaking, both of us lost in our own thoughts. Finally, she turned to me, her eyes red but resolute. What are you going to do, Terence? I sighed, running a hand through my hair. I don't know. Part of me wants to forgive her, to try to work through it, but I don't think I can. Not after this. She nodded, understanding in her eyes. It's hard to walk away, even when you know you should. We stood there in silence for a moment longer, the weight of everything pressing down on us. Both of us were left to pick up the pieces of lives that had been shattered by the people we trusted most. The next few days were a blur. Dakota moved out of the apartment she had shared with William, and I spent most of my time at Winston's, trying to figure out what to do next. Beatrice had called and texted a few times, but I hadn't responded. I wasn't ready to face her, not after everything that had happened. One afternoon, I found myself walking around the city, trying to clear my head. The sun was setting, casting a warm orange glow over the buildings, but I barely noticed. My mind was still spinning, replaying the events of the past few days over and over again. That's when my phone buzzed. It was a message from Beatrice. I know I don't deserve another chance, but I need to talk to you. Please. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the reply button. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to shut her out of my life completely. But another part of me, the part that still cared, that still remembered the good times, couldn't let go. After what felt like an eternity, I typed out a reply. Okay. Let's talk.